We have plenty more NHL prospect signings today, including players for the Vancouver Canucks, New York Islanders, and the Anaheim Ducks. We also have the full exhibition game schedule for the return to play, and we have some offseason rumors we're going to discuss, including players like Taylor Hall and Shane Gostisbehere. Could they be on the move this offseason? We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news topics to discuss today. Let's kick things off with the NHL exhibition schedule that was released earlier by the league. Of course, as we know, NHL Phase 3 is fully underway. Training camps are on the go. July the 26th will be when NHL teams travel to their hub cities of Toronto and Edmonton. And then July the 28th, 29th, and 30th, there will be some exhibition games. All NHL teams will get to play one warm-up game before the real games get underway for August the 1st when the play-in series gets underway, followed by the little mini tournament to determine the top 4 seeds in each conference. So let's take a look now at the game schedule. I'll put up a graphic here from the NHL to show you what to expect kicking things off on July the 28th with the first action, which will feature a lot of rivalries here and a lot of regional matchups, including the Penguins versus the Flyers. You get the Leafs versus the Habs and the Oilers versus the Flames in the Battle of Alberta. So some really interesting games there on the 28th. The 29th is the busiest day of the 3 with 6 matchups, including an all-Florida matchup with the Lightning versus the Panthers. The Blackhawks battle the Blues in a long-time rivalry there. You get the Avalanche against the Minnesota Wild, the Islanders battling the Rangers, the Canucks battling the Winnipeg Jets, and the Carolina Hurricanes going up against the Washington Capitals. And then on the final day of July the 30th, with the final 3 matchups, Nashville versus Dallas, Boston versus Columbus, and the Vegas Golden Knights doing battle with the Arizona Coyotes. So as I mentioned, a lot of those games are pretty much, rivalries or regionally set up that they're, playing a team that I guess could kind of interest viewers from a TV perspective. Of course, they're not all exactly lined up that way, but for the most part, they obviously try to do that when they could. So we'll have our first NHL action on TV on the 28th. So that's certainly a key date to look forward to. So mark your calendars for your first NHL action in quite some time. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have some more signings to discuss today. Let's kick things off with the Islanders signing Ilya Sorokin for the second day in a row. Now, in case you're confused by that or you missed the news yesterday, we did discuss in yesterday's video that the New York Islanders signed Ilya Sorokin to a 1-year contract. Based on Sorokin being an older rookie, he's only eligible for a 1-year entry-level contract. And of course, it was effective for the 1920 season. There was an open window for players that were unsigned prospects to sign contracts, and they were able to have a year count for 1920, even though they would not be eligible to play in this return to play action here to complete the 1920 NHL season. So Sorokin signed that contract, and then it was immediately expired, basically, so he didn't actually get any money from it. It's just a paper transaction. He becomes a restricted free agent, and then they put together his next contract for the Islanders for next season, which is also a 1-year deal, which will pay him $2 million. So that's a $1 million signing bonus and $1 million paid out in actual salary. So obviously for Sorokin to wait to come over, get the 1-year deal, have that year burnt off right away, obviously he'll make a lot more in his first NHL season than he would have otherwise. So you can't help but wonder what this means for the future between the pipes for the New York Islanders. Clearly last year they had Robin Lehner as a free agent who they let go. They signed Semyon Varlamov, who I mentioned all along. I thought that might be as leverage and protection to get Sorokin signed. Clearly they have the same agent, and the other thing that would help for Sorokin's sake is to have an older Russian goaltender who can mentor him about, the big transition to North America. There could be some language issues, language barriers that he needs to learn. So having a fellow older Russian goalie around to mentor him was certainly part of the plan, I believe, all along from the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello. So you pretty much can almost guarantee that goaltender Thomas Greiss, who's a pending unrestricted free agent, will depart the Islanders this offseason and be headed to another NHL team. He's been a pretty solid goaltender for the Islanders the last few years, really. So, he could be in a 1A, 1B situation, or he could end up being a really solid backup depending on who he's paired with at the NHL level. But I mean, clearly there's lots of teams going to be looking for goaltenders. I think we're going to see a lot of movement in a condensed NHL offseason this year, and Thomas Greiss is almost guaranteed now to be one of those players, because Sorokin is pretty much a guarantee to make this roster at a training camp for the 2021 NHL season. Had some other contract signings as well, including the Anaheim Ducks extending a restricted free agent forward Troy Terry. Of course, Troy Terry's been with the organization for parts of 3 seasons, mostly over the last 2 though, where he's played the equivalent of a full NHL campaign now, where he's put up 28 points in 81 games. Like I said, he did play a couple of games 3 years ago, but mostly over the last 2. His first full year 2 years ago in the American Hockey League was a pretty solid season. Was a point per game player in that league. This year he pretty much split between the 2 NHL and AHL, pretty close to being even. He's still a player that needs some development, but somebody who can be a part of their future for sure. He signs a 3-year extension, so he will be an RFA with arbitration eligibility when this contract expires. So he would have been an RFA this offseason. So it pays him a contract average annual value of $1.45 million. I don't believe there's any bonuses attached to that from what I can see. It appears to be straight salary from the information that I saw earlier from capfriendly.com. So I guess we'll see a pretty good signing, decent amount, low value, but potential high upside as he continues to develop and be a part of the Ducks' future. And another big signing as well, which I know Canucks fans were really excited about and a little bit on edge that it was going to happen, is they signed college defenseman Jack Rathbone, who has been in their organization now for a few years. He was a 2017 4th-round draft pick playing at the Harvard University. Has really developed into a really solid-looking prospect. With all their other younger players now that they've elevated to the NHL roster over the last couple of years, Rathbone, with his development at Harvard's pretty much become their top prospect, especially their top prospect on the blue line. I mean, we've seen other guys like Quinn Hughes make the jump, Elias Pettersson, and he's part of the next wave of Canucks prospects that'll be leading the way. I mean, Rathbone's developed into a really solid defenseman, was a point-per-game defenseman last year at Harvard, and he was certainly weighing out the option of whether or not to go back to Harvard or to sign his NHL contract. It appears as though that the Harvard season and many other college hockey teams very well could end up being delayed for their season start, so it's kind of unclear how that's going to work for those teams. So obviously he saw an opportunity to get his NHL contract, hopefully start up in November, December with the 2020-2021 season. A couple of years ago at Harvard, Rathbone was playing a lot with defenseman Adam Fox, who's really progressed and turned into quite a nice defenseman for the Rangers. They do have some similar type of play. I mean, they're not exactly a carbon copy of each other, but if he can have a solid start to his career like Fox did for the Rangers, then that's going to be another big addition to the Canucks blue line. He shoots left, so he'll be on the left side. You could have Quinn Hughes as the number 1 with Rathbone. I think has the potential to be a number 2 pair. I think they'll probably start him off on the 3rd pair, likely to start, but I do think next year he'd have an excellent shot at making the roster. No guarantees, of course, but I think the odds are decent. Of course, he gets to burn a year in his contract as well, so it'll have 2 more NHL seasons to get through before he'll be a restricted free agent. So I know it's a big signing for the Canucks. They were concerned that he could end up vacating and not signing and end up becoming a free agent down the road. I know, obviously, Jed Brackett, who was left the organization recently, was a big part of him being drafted, and many felt he had a good relationship with the player, and that since Brackett's gone, that maybe he might want to sign. He's from Massachusetts, a U.S.-born defenseman. Maybe he'd want to play closer to home. We see that happen quite a bit with some college players, so they kind of hold out and end up leaving. But media is certainly reporting that he has plenty of other great relationships, more than just Brackett, with the Canucks management and player personnel team. So that's obviously a nice signing here, and we'll see what he can do next year. He'll certainly be a key player for the Canucks to keep your eye on. As I mentioned as well, I want to take a quick look at some NHL offseason rumors regarding a couple of key players that we might see on the move, and let's kick things off first up with Flyers defenseman Shane Gostisbehere. Now, as training camps open, we're starting to learn more and more about some of these players. I mean, Gostisbehere's been a player who's been mentioned in trade rumors for a long time. The last 2 years, really, for him have not been great. And earlier this past season, Gostisbehere back in January had surgery on his left knee. And then we found out as training camps opened that while the NHL was paused, he actually ended up having surgery on his other knee. So he's actually had surgeries now on both knees during this current campaign. He was having a lot of issues with some cartilage. And then, of course, because of the way it was working out, he was kind of having trouble with his quad muscles too by the looks of it. So it certainly had an impact on his ability to play his style of game. He's a player who can be very quick and mobile with the puck. And of course, if he was having trouble with his knees, then clearly that would impact his ability to be his normal self on the ice. So it could explain a lot about his poor play, but obviously it's not a guarantee he's going to bounce back and be the defenseman he used to be right off the bat. Many even question his future in Philadelphia. Will he get an opportunity to play much in this return to play? Many of the other Flyers defensemen have kind of jumped ahead of him here in their importance and their role in the team. And many feel that he could end up being like a number 7 guy for the Flyers going into this playoff round, and that, they're not sure how much opportunity he'll get, and there's a good chance he could be shipped out when we hit the offseason. I mean, Shane Gostisbehere has a pretty good contract. If he can play like he used to be, it'd be a steal of a deal for the right team to pick him up. I know we've talked about before about some different teams who could be interested in him, including a team like Montreal, who's been rumored for a long time to be going after a left shot defenseman. But now that they've secured Alex Romanov, not really quite clear if they'll still continue to go after a more veteran player, or if they'll want to give Romanov a bigger role right off the bat. I guess they may not know the answer to that just yet. They want to see him in training camp and see how things go here. But certainly Gostisbehere, you can't help but wonder how this is going to impact his trade value, clearly knowing that he's had multiple surgeries and, of course, back-to-back seasons of not great production and not great results. If the Flyers give him an opportunity to play, they could really showcase him and see if he can be a key member to their team like they thought he could be a couple of years ago, or if they don't want to take the chance and they can at least get him showcased to get some stronger play, increase his value, which could enhance the probability of seeing a trade this offseason. But certainly some key information there on Gostisbehere, which could impact his future in Philadelphia or elsewhere if he ends up getting traded. But I know, like I said, there's a high probability right now at least that he does get moved when we hit the offseason. The other player we want to talk about today is Arizona Coyotes forward Taylor Hall. Now, there's been a lot of talk about him and where he's going to end up, of course, when free agency finally comes around. Elliot Friedman had a recent note to kind of stir things up here yet again, basically saying that if he had to bet on a free agent who was going to kind of go against the grain and make a surprise move, that he would pick Taylor Hall to be that guy, saying that basically Taylor Hall has made a lot of money over his career. And at this stage of his career, Taylor Hall is way more concerned about winning and having a chance in the playoffs and going after a Stanley Cup than he is about money. Obviously, money is important, but not as an extent of getting himself in the right situation and in a winning situation. So obviously, with that in mind, you kind of can't help but wonder how things are going to go. I know I've seen comments regarding Taylor Hall and how he's looked so far in training camp, indicating things have gone pretty well, but the Coyotes didn't really have a lot of success with him. When you combine with how the team played while Hall was a part of it, along with the fact that their cap situation is really unfavorable, it's going to make signing him very difficult if they really take a run at it. And at this point, it looks as though the Coyotes still fully intend to do everything in their power to retain his services and sign him to a longer-term contract. But before the pause, I would have said it is unlikely that Taylor Hall was going to take a shorter-term contract, that it appears as though he was looking for some good term and money in the right situation. But obviously, things have changed with the landscape quite a bit because of the NHL pause and everything that's gone on here over the last 3 or 4 months. And we're going to see a lot of NHL free agents not get the money they'd hoped for. I mean, we're going to have a flat salary cap for at least a couple of years. It's until league revenues hit, I think it was $4.5 billion is before we're going to see an increase. And there are some that believe that could take 3, possibly even 4 seasons. I personally think it's fair to say 2 to 3 for sure. But if the NHL cap is not increased for 3 or 4 seasons, then we're going to see a lot of players making less money in all new contracts that are signed moving forward. So for Taylor Hall, to make me sign a short-term 1 or 2 year contract with the right team where they could really go for it, have him come in as that piece to put them over the top to win a championship, even if it means that they don't keep him longer term, I think those possibilities are higher now than they ever were before. And to me, the team that makes the most sense is the Colorado Avalanche, but obviously no guarantees that happens. But I know it was rumored that when New Jersey was going to be trading Hall, that Joe Sakic and the Avalanche were quite interested, and there was apparently a lot of conversations that took place. I think for the right deal, obviously the Avalanche could make it happen. I mean, they do have to be careful. They have some contracts like Cale Makar that are going to be coming up, and some of their other guys like McKinnon and Landeskog are not all that far from expiring, so it would have to be really short, maybe even a 1 year deal. But I can see that possibility being higher now than before, as I mentioned. Even a team like Calgary or Montreal have been in the mix as well. Obviously, he's originally born in Calgary, so there's a lot of talk about him heading back to play in Alberta. Now, in Calgary's situation, they would certainly have to make some other moves to make it happen, but there's a lot of talk if the Flames don't have success in this 24-team format to return to play here. If they lose in their opening round against Winnipeg, that there's a pretty good chance we're going to see some shakeups, and a major player could end up being traded out of that organization, which could create the necessary space for Hall to be signed. So in my opinion, I do think there's a chance that he stays in Arizona, but John Chayka is going to have to be extremely creative and move out a fair amount of money to make it happen. And then you get Colorado, Montreal, Calgary seem to be the other most likely landing spots, but there's certainly hard to say right now, as a lot of teams are going to have cap problems. We're probably going to see an extremely active, condensed offseason when the fall comes around, and it's certainly going to be a very interesting time to see how all these teams look when next season finally gets underway. So let me know what your thoughts are. What are the most likely landing spots for Taylor Hall when the offseason finally kicks in? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.